The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 16th chapter. Then Jesus said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to him, 'What is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer.' Then the manager said to himself, 'What will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes.' So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil. He said to him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, 'And how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, 'Take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal home. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much. And whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." The Gospel of the Lord. Well, this is an interesting passage. And it's a little confusing because often when we hear Jesus' parables, we start trying to figure out who's God in the story, right? Where's God in this story? Well, Jesus isn't telling a story about God. He's just telling a story. God's not in this parable. What Jesus is saying is there's a wealthy person who has a lot of property, and so he hires a manager to manage the property. But the manager's not doing his job. He's squandering the master's property. So word gets back to the master that he's not doing his job, and so he comes to the manager and he says, "You can't work for me anymore." Well, now, this guy who's been doing nothing, a fire gets lit under him because his neck's on the line, right? And so he says, "Oh my goodness, I better do something or else I'm not going to be able to survive." So he takes the records, the accounting of people who owe the master for something, and he goes to these people and he says, "Hey, what do you owe? Yeah, let's just cut that in half," right? Cut that in half. He's trying to make friends for himself because he's afraid. He's afraid for his own well-being. Well, what's interesting is the master comes and he commends him. He commends him. Why? Because he finally did something. He's been doing nothing. He's been sitting idle, squandering everything. And finally, even if it's for selfish reasons, he did something, right? And so the message for us out of that section is do something. Do something. Don't sit idle. Don't pout and whine and just wallow in your own grief. Do something. So, can I be vulnerable with you for a moment? In light of everything that's been happening in this world, I'm struggling. I'm struggling right now. Anybody else in the room struggling? Am I the only one? Yeah. This is hard right now. And I've been doing a lot of discerning about why am I struggling? What is causing me to be in so much pain at this moment. And I've figured out it's not simply the politics that's going on. It's not simply TV. It's not simply the news. I'm struggling because so many people are in pain right now. So many people are hurting. We're being inundated, especially in the last few weeks. We're being inundated with phone calls and with people coming in to see us to say, what do we do? What do I do right now? How do I live in this time? How do I live in this world? And I don't have an answer. I want a formula. I want a plan. I want a 5-step process to give to people, and it doesn't exist. We had a person from Evergreen text us who said that our kids are going to school now and looking at classmates and wondering which one will be the next perpetrator. Our kids are beginning to realize that we as adults can't protect them. This is awful. It's absolutely awful. And when I became a pastor, I knew I would be in people's lives. But I don't think I fully understood that when you're a pastor, you don't have a job where you check in and check out, where you leave everything at the office. As a pastor, I carry your pain. I carry it. And I feel it because I love you. You're important to me. The world is important to me. And so I'm struggling with this. It's a really difficult time. And so the only thing I know to say to people right now is live Jesus. Live Jesus. You see, the most important passage or verse in this passage is verse 13. It's the last verse where it says you can't serve God and wealth. Now, that word wealth, it's a bad translation. The Greek is mammonos. It used to say you can't serve God and mammon. Remember mammon? So the old translations would say mammon. Well, mammon doesn't mean wealth. What mammon means is personal gain, selfish pursuits. What Jesus is saying here is you can't serve God and personal gain, selfish pursuits, self-centeredness. You can't do both. It's one or the other. You can't do them both at the same time. And I think what Jesus is saying to us today is when we live selfish lives, when we live thinking about ourselves, where we have to be right, we have to be in charge, we have to have power, we have to be on top, we have to dominate, we have to be successful, we devour each other. If we live personal gain lives, we devour each other. We see each other as enemies. We attack each other. And we're not going to change the world by using the world's tactics. We're not going to change the world by using the world's ways of doing things. The only way that this world will change is if we live differently. And Jesus came to show us the better way. Jesus didn't live pursuing personal gain. Jesus took all of his gifts and his abilities and he poured them out for the sake of others. He welcomed the stranger. He healed the sick. He cared for those in need. And it's not just here in Luke where we hear this, it's all throughout the Bible. It's constantly throughout the Bible. We heard the Amos text, which is Hebrew scriptures. Amos was a minor prophet, where Amos says, quit trampling on the poor. Quit taking advantage of those who are weak and disenfranchised. Knock that off. That's not who we're called to be. We're called to live different than the way the world lives. When Jesus was arrested, he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. And maybe you remember this story. The authorities came to arrest him. And Peter pulled out a sword. Remember this story? Peter pulled out a sword and he cut off an ear of one of the men who had come to arrest Jesus. And what did Jesus say to him? No. No. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. We aren't using the world's ways to transform this world. That's not who we are. And Jesus actually healed the ear of a man who came to arrest him. And Jesus was taken out, and he was beaten, and he was humiliated and mocked and scorned. They put a crown of thorns on his head. They made him carry the cross up this hill after he had been terribly beaten. And they drove nails through his hands and his feet. And even then, Jesus didn't use the world's ways. He didn't strike back against those who were killing him. He didn't call them names. He didn't curse them. He actually loved those who were killing him. He prayed for them. He said, Father, forgive them because they don't know. They don't know what they're doing. We have people in our world today that don't know what they're doing. Horrible things are happening because people don't know what they're doing. But we can't vilify those people. We can't demonize the people who think differently than we do. We can't use the world's ways of arguing and fighting in order to change how people think. They just get more and more entrenched. They get meaner and madder and everything else. If we're going to transform this world, we have to live like Jesus. We might change somebody's mind by loving them. We might change somebody's mind by seeing them and seeing into them, recognizing that they too are a child of God. We might change somebody's mind by respecting them and honoring them and listening to them. We can't use the world's tactics to transform the world. It just perpetuates the division and the violence and the hatred that appears to be existing today. When Jesus died, there was a Roman soldier, a centurion. He was in charge of 100 men, standing at the foot of the cross. And he said, surely this one is the Son of God. Surely this one, because he had never seen anyone act the way Jesus acted in that moment of death, suffering and death. And maybe that centurion was changed forever, I don't know. But we're not being called to fight for God. We're being called to reveal God, to show God. A call, God is coming to each of us and calling us to be the heart, hands, and feet of Jesus in the world. Let me say a little bit about call. When I was being called to be a pastor, I was in my last year of college. I was dating my now wife, Carrie, at the time. We've been married 32 years. Isn't that great? She is yeah, thank you. Thank you. She's a lucky woman. A lucky woman. So we were dating. Carrie was Catholic. I was discerning being a Lutheran pastor. She wasn't real keen on me being a Lutheran pastor, and I wasn't sure if I was being called. I believed I was, but is this really what I want to do? So we needed to go talk to somebody. So Carrie suggested we go talk to her priest, Father Mancini. He was fantastic. And he said something very profound to me. He said, Doug, when God calls you, you get to say no. When God calls you to do something, you get to say no. But God doesn't quit. A couple years later, God's going to knock back on the door and say, hey, let's go. It's time. Let's go. You can say no again, and then God's going to show up at the door again, knocking, because God is persistent. God doesn't quit. God never gives up. And every single one of us is being called to be Jesus in the world. We're being called to be Jesus in our families, in our homes, in our workplaces, in our schools, in our neighborhoods, everywhere. We're being called. We get to say no, but God's not going to quit because God is a God of life. When Jesus came into this world, it was terrible at the time of Jesus. It was awful at the time of Jesus. There was so much oppression, and the Romans occupied Palestine. The religious leaders were manipulating and oppressing the people. It was a terrible time. But Jesus came to show us a better way. And when God raised Jesus from the dead, he gave us the cemented message that God will never, ever, ever give up on creating life. And what we're called to do today is to put our faith in God, not in government, not in money, not in military, not in power, but faith that love and life win through the risen Christ. And that's what gives us hope. And that's what gives us peace. And that's what causes us to never quit. Pastor Rick Barger, who was the former lead pastor here at Abiding Hope, used to say, we are abiding, never give up, never throw in the towel, Hope Church. That's who we are. So I want to challenge you this week, do something that spreads love. Do something that shows compassion. Do something to serve or to give. And I promise you, it'll give you a sense of purpose. You'll feel like you're a part of something that matters. And it'll inspire you to do more. But we have to live different. We have to live Jesus if we're going to have any hope of transforming this world. God loves each of you, and I do too. Amen.